Oscar Wilde, A Study ******. Oscar Wilde. This edition consists of 500 copies. 50 copies have been printed on handmade paper. How utter. Oscar Wilde. A study from the French of André Gide with introduction, notes and bibliography by Stuart Mason. Oxford. The Hollywell Press. MCMV to Donald Bruce Wallace, of New York, in memory of a visit last summer to Bagneux Cemetery, a pilgrimage of love when we watered with our tears the roses and lilies with which we covered the poet's grave. Oxford, September, 1905. The little poem on the opposite page first saw the light in the pages of the Dublin University magazine for September, 1876. It has not been reprinted since. The Greek quotation is taken from the Agamemnon of Aeschylus, L. 120. Oh well for him who lives at ease with garnered gold in wide domain, nor heeds the plashing of the rain, the crashing down of forest trees. Oh well for him who ne'er hath known the travail of the hungry years, a father grey with grief and tears, a mother weeping all alone. But well for him whose feet hath trod the weary road of toil and strife, yet from the sorrows of his life builds ladders to be nearer God. Oscar F. Wills Wilde. S.M. Magdalen College, Oxford. Note. M. Gide's study of Mr. Oscar Wilde, perhaps the best account yet written of the poet's latter days, appeared first in El Hermitage, a monthly literary review, in June, 1902. It was afterwards reprinted with some few slight alterations in a volume of critical essays, entitled Pretexts, by M. Gide. It is now published in English for the first time, by special arrangement with the author. S.M. Contents. Page poem by Oscar Wilde. Exi Introductory 1 Inscription on Oscar Wilde's tombstone 11 Letters from M. André Gide 12 Oscar Wilde, from the French of André Gide 15 Sonnet to Oscar Wilde by Augustus M. Moore 89 List of published writings of Oscar Wilde 93 Bibliographical notes on the English editions 107 List of illustrations. Page Cartoon, How utter, from a cartoon published by Messrs. Shrimpton at Oxford about 1880. By permission of Mr. Hubert Giles, 23 Broad Street, Oxford. Frontispiece Oscar Wilde at Oxford, 1878. By permission of Mr. Hubert Giles. 16 Oscar Wilde in 1893. From a photograph by Messrs. Gilman and Company, Oxford. 48 The Grave at Bagneux, by permission of the proprietors of the Sphere and the Tatler. 80 Reduced facsimile of the cover of the Woman's World 96 Oscar Wilde Introductory. Oscar Fingal O'Flaherty Wills Wilde was born at 1 Merrion Square North, Dublin, on 16 October 1854. He was the second son of Sir William Robert Wilde, Knight, a celebrated surgeon who was president of the Irish Academy and chairman of the Census Committee. Sir William Wilde was born in 1799, and died at the age of 77 years. Oscar Wilde's mother was Jane Francesca, daughter of Archdeacon Elgee. She was born in 1826, and married in 1851. She became famous in literary circles under the pen names of Speranza and John Fenshaw Ellis, among her published writings being Driftwood from Scandinavia, 1884, Legends of Ireland, 1886, and Social Studies, 1893. Lady Wilde died at her residence in Chelsea on 3 February, 1896. 1. Oscar Wilde received his early education at Portera Royal School, Enniskillen, which he entered in 1864 at the age of 9 years. Here he remained for 7 years, and, winning a Royal Scholarship, he entered Trinity College, Dublin, on 19 October 1871, being then 17 years of age. In the following year he obtained first-class honours in classics in Hilary, Trinity and Michaelmas terms. He also won the gold medal for Greek, too, and other distinctions. The Trinity College magazine Kotabos, for the years 1876–9, contains some of his earliest published poems. In 1874 he obtained a classical scholarship, 3, and went up to Oxford, where, as a demi, he matriculated at Magdalen College on 17 October, the day after his 20th birthday. His career at Oxford was one unbroken success. In Trinity Term, June, 1876, he obtained a first class in the Honour School of Classical Moderations, in Litteris Graecis et Latinis, which he followed up 2 years later by a similar distinction in Greats or Honour Finals, in Litteris Humanioribus. In this same Trinity Term, for 1878, he further distinguished himself by gaining the Sir Roger Newdigate Prize for English Verse with his poem, Ravenna, 5, which he recited at the Insignia or annual commemoration of benefactors in the Sheldonian Theatre on 26 June. He proceeded to the degree of Beer in the following term, 6. He is described in Foster's Alumni Oxonienses as a professor of aesthetics and art critic. He afterwards lectured on art in America, 7, 1882, and in the provinces on his return to England. About this time he wrote his poems, The Sphinx and the Harlot's House, 1883, and his tragedy in blank verse, The Duchess of Padua. The latter was written specially for Miss Mary Anderson, but she did not produce it. This was, however, played in America by the late Lawrence Barrett in 1883, as was also another play in blank verse, entitled Vera, or The Nihilists, during the previous year. He had already published in America and England a volume of poems, which went through several editions in a few months. In 1884 Oscar Wilde married, 8, Miss Constance Mary Lloyd, a daughter of the well-known Q.C., by whom he had 2 sons, born in June, 1885, and November, 1886, respectively. Mrs. Wilde died in 1898, and his only brother, William, in March of the following year. During the next 5 or 6 years after his marriage, articles from his pen appeared in several of the leading reviews, notably the portrait of Mr. W. H. in Blackwood's Edinburgh Magazine for July, 1889, and those brilliant essays afterwards incorporated in Intentions, in the 19th Century and the Fortnightly Review. In 1888 he was the editor of a monthly journal called The Woman's World. In July 1890, the picture of Dorian Gray appeared in Lippincott's monthly magazine. It was the only novel he ever wrote, and was published in book form with 7 additional chapters in the following year, and is one of the most remarkable books in the English language. With the production and immediate success of Lady Windermere's Fan early in 1892, he was at once recognized as a dramatist of the first rank. This was followed a year later by A Woman of No Importance, and after brief intervals by An Ideal Husband and The Importance of Being Earnest. 9. The 2 latter were being played in London at the time of the author's arrest and trial. Into the melancholy story of his trial it is not proposed to enter here beyond mentioning the fact that he was condemned by the newspapers, and, consequently, by the vast majority of the British public, several weeks before a jury could be found to return a verdict of guilty. On Saturday, the 25th of May, 1895, he was sentenced to 2 years' imprisonment with hard labor, most of which period was passed at Wandsworth and Reading. On his release from Reading on Wednesday, the 19th of May, 1897, he at once crossed to France with friends, and a few days later penned that pathetic letter, pregnant with pity, in which he pleaded for the kindlier treatment of little children lying in our English gaols. This letter, with his own name attached, filled over 2 columns in the Daily Chronicle of the 28th of May. It created considerable sensation, a well-known Catholic weekly comparing it in its crushing power to the letter with which Stevenson shamed the shameless traducer of Father Damien. A second letter on the subject of the cruelties of the English prison system appeared in the same paper on the 24th of March, 1898. It was headed, "Don't read this if you want to be happy today," and was signed the author of The Ballad of Reading Gaol. The Ballad of Reading Gaol was published early in this same year under the nom de plume C.3.3, Oscar Wilde's prison number. Its authorship was acknowledged shortly afterwards in an autograph edition. Since that time countless editions of this famous work have been issued in England and America, and translations have appeared in French, German and Spanish. Of this poem a reviewer in a London journal said, "The whole is awful as the pages of Sophocles." That he has rendered with his fine art so much of the essence of his life and the life of others in that inferno to the sensitive, is a memorable thing for the social scientist, but a much more memorable thing for literature. This is a simple, a poignant, a great ballad, one of the greatest in the English language. Of the sorrows and sufferings of the last few years of his life, his friend Mr. Robert Harborough Sherard has written in The Story of an Unhappy Friendship, and M. Gide refers to them in the following pages. After several weeks of intense suffering, death the silent pilot came at last, and the most brilliant writer of the 19th century passed away on the afternoon of the 30th of November, 1900, in poverty and almost alone. The little hotel in Paris, Hôtel d'Alsace, 13 Rue des Beaux-Arts, where he died, has become a place of pilgrimage from all parts of the world for those who admire his genius or pity his sorrows. He was buried, 3 days later, in the cemetery at Bagneux, about 4 miles out of Paris. Stuart Mason. 1. In 1890 Lady Wilde received a pension of £50 from the civil list. 2. The subject for this year, 1874, was the fragments of the Greek comic poets, as edited by Mainick. The medal was presented annually, from a fund left for the purpose by Bishop Berkeley. 3. The demyship was of the annual value of £95, and was tenable for 5 years. Oscar Wilde's success was announced in the University Gazette, Oxford, the 11th of July, 1874. 4. On Wednesday, the 1st of May, Oscar Wilde, dressed as Prince Rupert, was present at a fancy dress ball given by Mrs. George Herbert Morrell at Headington Hill Hall. 5. The Newdigate was listened to with rapt attention and frequently applauded. Oxford and Cambridge Undergraduates Journal, the 27th of June, 1878. 6. The degree of Beer was conferred upon him on Thursday, November 28, 1878. 7. Amongst the places he visited were New York, Louisville, Kentucky, Omaha City and California. In the autumn of this same year, 1882, after leaving the States, Mr. Wilde went to Canada and thence to Nova Scotia, arriving at Halifax about the 8th of October. 8. The announcement in the Times of the 31st of May, 1884, was as follows: May 29, at S. James's Church, Paddington, by the Reverend Walter Abbott, Vicar, Oscar, younger son of the late Sir William Wilde, M.D., of Dublin, to Constance Mary, only daughter of the late Horace Lloyd, Esquire, Q.C., 9. Of the importance of being earnest the author is reported to have said, "The first act is ingenious, the second beautiful, the third abominably clever." It was revived by Mr. George Alexander at the St. James's Theatre on the 7th of January, 1902, and Lady Windermere's Fan on the 19th of November, 1904. Across. Oscar Wilde, the 16th of October, 1854, November 30th, 1900. Verbis mais adornile audbentit super illos stillabat eloquium meum. Job 6, 22 RIP. Inscription on Oscar Wilde's tombstone. Letters from M. André Gide. I Château de Couverville, par Criquetot Lesneval, SNE. Inferior. Monsieur, quelques plaisirs que j'ai eu de voir mon étude Sir Wilde traduite en anglais, je puis vous répondre avant d'avoir correspondu avec mon éditeur. L'article en question, après avoir paru dans l'Hermitage et réuni d'autres études dans un volume, prétextes, que le Mercure de France éditeur l'Indonais. Un trait me lie cette maison et je suis pas libre de décider seul. Votre lettre mis quelque temps et me parvenir ici, au portant j habit. Des que j'aurai la réponse du Mercure de France m'empresserai de vous la faire savoir. Vous les croire, monsieur, et l'assurance de mes meilleurs sentiments. André Gide. September 9, 1904. To Monsieur, les aimons éditeurs le soin de vous écrire au sujet des conditions de la publication en anglais de mon étude. Desire, comme vous le disais, que la traduction que vous proposez de faire est report au texte done par le Mercure de France dans mon volume Prétextes, et non est salué, fautif, de l'Hermitage. Le texte des contes de Wilde que cite Esseloin, ainsi que vous pouvez le voir, du texte anglais que Wilde lui-même en a donné. Il importe que ce texte oral reste différent du texte écrit de ses poèmes in prose. Quoi, si ridicule que cela puisse paraître d'abord, question il faut retraduire en anglais le texte français que en donne, et que j'ai écrit presque sous la dictée de Wilde. Et non pas cite simplement le texte anglais tel que Wilde le rédige plus tard. Elle fait en estes différent. Vous les croire, monsieur, et l'assurance de mes sentiments les meilleurs. André Gide. September 14th, 1904. Oscar Wilde. I was at Biskra in December 1900, when I learned through the newspapers of the lamentable end of Oscar Wilde. Distance, alas, prevented me from joining in the meagre procession which followed his body to the cemetery at Bagneux. It was of no use reproaching myself that my absence would seem to diminish still further the small number of friends who remained faithful to him. At least I wanted to write these few pages at once, but for a considerable period Wilde's name seemed to become once more the property of the newspapers. Now that every idle rumor connected with his name, so sadly famous, is hushed, now that the mob is at last wearied after having praised, wondered at, and then reviled him, perhaps, a friend may be allowed to lay, like a wreath on a forsaken grave, these lines of affection, admiration, and respectful pity. When the trial, with all its scandal, which so excited the public mind in England, threatened to wreck his life, certain writers and artists attempted to carry out, in the name of literature and art, a kind of rescue. It was hoped that by praising the writer the man would be excused. Unfortunately, there was a misunderstanding here, for it must be acknowledged that Wilde was not a great writer. The leaden boy which was thrown to him helped only to weigh him down. His works, far from keeping him up, seemed to sink with him. In vain were some hands stretched out. The torrent of the world overwhelmed him. All was over. Oscar Wilde at Oxford, 1878. It was not possible at that time to think of defending him in any other way. Instead of trying to shelter the man behind his work, it was necessary to show forth first the man as an object of admiration, as I am going to try to do now, and then the work itself illuminated by his personality. I have put all my genius into my life. I have put only my talent into my works, said Wilde once. Great writer, no, but great viveur, yes, if one may use the word in the fullest sense of the French term. Like certain Greek philosophers of old, Wilde did not write his wisdom, but spoke and lived it, entrusting it rashly to the fleeting memory of man, thereby writing it as it were on water. Let those who knew him for a longer time than I did, tell the story of his life. one of those who listened to him the most eagerly relates here simply a few personal recollections. I and the mighty nations would have crowned me, who am crownless now and without name, and some orient dawn had found me kneeling on the threshold of the house of fame. Those who became acquainted with Wilde only in the latter years of his life form a wrong conception of the wonderful creature he formerly was, if they judge from the enfeebled and crushed being given back to us from prison, as Ernest Le Jeunesse paints him, for instance, in the best or rather the only passable article on the great reprobate which anyone has had the talent or the courage to write. 1. It was in 1891 that I met him for the first time. Wilde had then what Thackeray calls one of the greatest of a great man's qualities, success. 2. His manner and his appearance were triumphant. His success was so assured that it seemed to go in front of him, and he had only to advance. His books were causing wonder and delight. All London was soon to rush to see his plays. 3. He was rich, he was great, he was handsome, he was loaded with happiness and honors. Some compared him to an Asiatic Bacchus, others to some Roman emperor, and others again to Apollo himself. In short, he was resplendent. In Paris his name passed from mouth to mouth as soon as he arrived. Several absurd sayings went round concerning him, as that after all he was only the man who smoked gold-tipped cigarettes, and walked about the streets with a sunflower in his hand. 4. Skillful in misleading those who are the heralds of earthly fame, Wilde knew how to hide his real personality behind an amusing phantom, with which he humorously deluded the public. I had heard him talked about at Stéphane Mallarmé's house, where he was described as a brilliant conversationalist, and I expressed a wish to know him, little hoping that I should ever do so. A happy chance, or rather a friend, gave me the opportunity, and to him I made known my desire. Wilde was invited to dinner. It was at a restaurant. We were a party of 4, but 3 of us were content to listen. Wilde did not converse, he told tales. During the whole meal he hardly stopped. He spoke in a slow, musical tone, and his very voice was wonderful. He knew French almost perfectly, but pretended, now and then, to hesitate a little for a word to which he wanted to call our attention. He had scarcely any accent, at least only what it pleased him to affect when it might give a somewhat new or strange appearance to a word. For instance, he used purposely to pronounce skepticism as skepticism. The stories he told us without a break that evening were not of his best. Uncertain of his audience he was testing us, for, in his wisdom, or perhaps in his folly, he never betrayed himself into saying anything which he thought would not be to the taste of his hearers, so he doled out food to each according to his appetite. Those who expected nothing from him got nothing, or only a little light froth, and as at first he used to give himself up to the task of amusing, many of those who thought they knew him will have known him only as the amuser. When dinner was over we went out. My 2 friends walking together, Wilde took me aside and said quite suddenly, "You hear with your eyes, that is why I am going to tell you this story." He began, when Narcissus died, the flowers of the fields were plunged in grief, and asked the river for drops of water that they might mourn for him. "Oh," replied the river, "if all my drops of water were tears, I should not have enough to weep for Narcissus myself. I loved him." "How could you help loving Narcissus?" rejoined the flowers, "so beautiful was he." "Was he beautiful?" asked the river. "And who should know that better than yourself?" said the flowers, "for, every day, lying on your bank, he would mirror his own beauty in your waters." Wilde stopped for a moment, and then went on, "If I loved him," replied the river, "it is because when he hung over my waters I saw the reflection of my waters in his eyes." Then Wilde, drawing himself up, added with a strange outburst of laughter, "That is called the disciple." We had reached his door, and left him. He asked me to meet him again. During the course of that year and the next I saw him frequently and everywhere. In the presence of others, as I have mentioned, Wilde would put on an air of showing off in order to astonish, or amuse, or even exasperate people. He never listened to, and scarcely took any notice of an idea from the moment it was no longer purely his own. When he was no longer the only one to shine, he would shut himself up, and emerge again only when one found oneself alone with him once more. But as soon as we were alone again he would begin, "Well, what have you been doing since yesterday?" Now, as at that time my life was passing uneventfully enough, the telling of what I had been doing was of no interest. So, to humor him, I began recounting some trifling incidents, and noticed while I was speaking that Wilde's face was growing gloomy. "You really did that," he said. "Yes," I answered. "And you are speaking the truth?" "Absolutely." "Then why repeat it?" "You must see that it is not of the slightest importance. You must understand that there are two worlds. The one exists and is never talked about. It is called the real world because there is no need to talk about it in order to see it. The other is the world of art. One must talk about that, because otherwise it would not exist." Then he went on, "Once upon a time there was a man who was beloved in his village because he used to tell tales. Every morning he left the village, and when he returned in the evening all the laborers of the village who had been working all the day would crowd round him and say, 'Come, now, tell us a tale. What have you seen today?' The man said, 'I have seen in the forest a faun playing on a flute and making a band of little wood nymphs dance.' 'Go on with your story, what did you see?' the men would say. 'When I reached the seashore, I saw 3 mermaids beside the waves, combing their green hair with golden combs. And the villagers loved him because he used to tell them tales. One morning he left his village as usual, and when he reached the seashore he saw 3 mermaids at the water's edge combing their green hair with golden combs. And as he passed on his way he saw, near a wood, a faun playing a flute to a band of wood nymphs. That evening when he returned to his village the people said to him as they did every evening, 'Come, tell us a tale, what have you seen?' And the man answered, 'I have seen nothing.' Wilde stopped for a moment to allow the effect of the story to sink into me, and then he continued, "I do not like your lips. They are quite straight, like the lips of a man who has never told a lie. I want you to learn to lie so that your lips may become beautiful and curved like the lips of an antique mask. Do you know what makes the work of art, and what makes the work of nature? Do you know what the difference is? For the narcissus is as beautiful as a work of art, so what distinguishes them cannot be merely beauty. Do you know what it is that distinguishes them? A work of art is always unique. Nature, who makes nothing durable, is ever repeating herself, so that nothing she makes may be lost. A single narcissus produces many blooms, that is why each one lives but a day. Every time nature invents a new form, she at once makes a replica. A sea monster in one sea knows that in another sea there is another monster like itself. When God creates in history a Nero, a Borgia or a Napoleon, he puts another one on one side. No one knows it, but that does not matter. The important point is that one may be a success. For God makes man, and man makes the work of art. Forestalling what I was on the point of saying, he proceeded, "Yes, I know, one day a great restlessness fell upon the earth, as if, at last, nature was going to create something unique, something quite unique, and Christ is born on earth. Yes, I know, quite well, but listen, when Joseph of Arimathea came down in the evening from Mount Calvary where Jesus had just died, he saw on a white stone a young man seated weeping. And Joseph went near to him and said, I understand how great thy grief must be, for certainly that man was a just man. But the young man made answer, Oh, it is not for that I am weeping. I am weeping because I, too, have wrought miracles. I also have given sight to the blind, I have healed the palsied, and I have raised the dead, I, too, have caused the barren fig tree to wither away, and I have turned water into wine. And yet they have not crucified me, for, And that Oscar Wilde was convinced of his representative mission was made quite clear to me on more than one occasion. The gospel disturbed and troubled the pagan Wilde. He could not forgive it its miracles. The pagan miracle lies in the work of art, Christianity encroached on it. Every strong departure from realism in art demands a realism which is convinced in life. His most ingenious fables, his most alarming ironies were uttered with a view to confront the two moralities, I mean, pagan naturalism and Christian idealism, and to put the latter out of countenance in every respect. This is another of his stories. When Jesus was minded to return to Nazareth, Nazareth was so changed that he no longer recognized his own city. The Nazareth where he had lived was full of lamentations and tears. This city was filled with outbursts of laughter and song. And Christ entering into the city saw some slaves laden with flowers, hastening towards the marble staircase of a house of white marble. Christ entered into the house, and at the back of a hall of jasper he saw, lying on a purple couch, a man whose disordered locks were mingled with red roses, and whose lips were red with wine. Christ drew near to him, and laying his hand on his shoulder said to him, "Why dost thou lead this life?" The man turned round, recognized him and said, "I was a leper once, thou didst heal me. Why should I live another life?" Christ went out of the house, and behold, in the street he saw a woman whose face and raiment were painted and whose feet were shod with pearls. And behind her walked a man who wore a cloak of 2 colors, and whose eyes were bright with lust. And Christ went up to the man and laid his hand on his shoulder, and said to him, "Tell me, why art thou following this woman, and why dost thou look at her in such wise?" The man turning round recognized him and said, "I was blind, thou didst heal me, what else should I do with my sight?" And Christ drew near to the woman and said to her, "This road which thou art following is the pathway of sin, why follow it?" The woman recognized him, and laughing said, "The way which I follow is a pleasant way, and thou hast pardoned all my sins." Then Christ felt his heart filled with sadness, and he was minded to leave the city. But as he was going out of it, he saw sitting by the bank of the moat of the city, a young man who was weeping. He drew near to him, and touching the locks of his hair, said to him, "Friend, why dost thou weep?" The young man raised his eyes, recognized him and made answer, "I was dead and thou hast raised me to life. What else should I do with my life? Let me tell this one story more, illustrating one of the strangest pitfalls into which the imagination can mislead a man, and let anyone, who is able, understand the strange paradox which Wilde here makes use of. Then there was a great silence in the judgment hall of God. And the soul of the sinner stood naked before God. And God opened the book of the life of the sinner and said, Surely thy life hath been very evil. Thou hast. There followed a wonderful, a marvelous list of sins. 5. Since thou hast done all this, surely I will send thee to hell. And the man cried out, Thou canst not send me to hell. And God said to the man, Wherefore can I not send thee to hell? And the man made answer and said, Because in hell I have always lived. And there was a great silence in the judgment hall of God. And God spake and said to the man, Seeing that I may not send thee to hell, I am going to send thee to heaven. Thou canst not send me to heaven. And God said to the man, Wherefore can I not send thee to heaven? And the man said, Because I have never been able to imagine it. And there was a great silence in the judgment hall of God. 6. One morning Wilde handed me an article in which a sufficiently dense critic congratulated him on knowing how to write pretty stories in which the better to clothe his thoughts. They think, began Wilde, that all thoughts come naked to the birth. They do not understand that I cannot think otherwise than in stories. The sculptor does not try to reproduce his thoughts in marble, he thinks in marble, straight away. Listen, there was once a man who could think only in bronze. And this man one day had an idea of the pleasure that abideth for a moment. And he felt that he must give expression to it. But in the whole world there was but one single piece of bronze, for men had used it all up. and this man felt that he would go mad if he did not give expression to his idea. And he remembered a piece of bronze on the tomb of his wife, a statue which he had himself fashioned to set on the tomb of his wife, the only woman he had ever loved. It was the image of the sorrow that endureth forever. And the man felt that he was becoming mad, because he could not give expression to his idea. Then he took this image of sorrow, of the sorrow that endureth forever, and broke it up and melted it and fashioned of it an image of pleasure, of the pleasure that abideth for a moment. Wilde was a believer in a certain fatality besetting the path of the artist, and that the man is at the mercy of the idea. There are, he used to say, artists of two kinds, some supply answers, and others ask questions. It is necessary to know if one belongs to those who answer or to those who ask questions, for the one who asks questions is never the one who answers them. There are certain works which wait for their interpretation for a long time. It is because they are giving answers to questions that have not yet been asked, for the question often comes a terribly long time after the answer. And he added further, the soul is born old in the body, it is to rejuvenate the soul that the body becomes old. Plato is Socrates young again. Then it was 3 years before I saw him again. 1. In La Revue Blanche. 2. Henry Esmond, Book 2, Chap. 11. Thackeray puts these words into the mouth of the famous Mr. Joseph Addison, who continues, T is the result of all the others, T is a latent power in him which compels the favor of the gods, and subjugates fortune. 3. Oscar Wilde's first play, Lady Windermere's Fan, was produced at the St. James's Theatre on the 20th of February, 1892. This was followed by A Woman of No Importance, the 19th of April, 1893, and An Ideal Husband, January 3, 1895, at Haymarket, and The Importance of Being Earnest, the 14th of February, 1895, at the St. James's. 4. This story appeared under the title of The Master with Other Poems in Prose in the Fortnightly Review for July, 1894. 2 of them, The Disciple and The House of Judgment, were first published in The Spirit Lamp in 1893. This was a magazine published at Oxford under the editorship of Lord Alfred Douglas, who had recently bought it from the founder and changed its style and form. A complete set of the 15 numbers is now exceedingly scarce. 5. Henry Davray translated these poems in prose in La Revue Blanche. 6. Since Villiers de l'Isle Adam has betrayed it, everyone knows, alas, the great secret of the Church, there is no purgatory. 2. I have made my choice, have lived my poems, and though youth is gone in wasted days, I have found the lover's crown of myrtle better than the poet's crown of bays. Here tragic reminiscences begin. A persistent rumor, growing louder and louder with the fame of his successes. In London his plays were being acted in no less than 3 different theatres at the same time. 1. Attributed to Wilde's strange habits, on hearing of which, some people tempered their indignation with a smile, while others were not in the least indignant. It was claimed, moreover, as regards these alleged habits, that he concealed them little, and often on the other hand paraded them, some said courageously, others out of cynicism, and others for a pose. I was filled with astonishment when I heard these rumors. In no way, all the time that I had been intimate with him, had he given me the slightest ground for suspicion. But already out of prudence numbers of his old friends were deserting him. They did not yet actually cut him, but they no longer made a point of saying they had met him. An extraordinary coincidence brought us together again. It was in January, 1895. I was traveling. A peevish disposition urged me on, and I sought solitude rather than novelty of scene. The weather was frightful. I had fled from Algiers to Blida, and I was about to quit Blida for Biskra. Just as I was leaving my hotel, I glanced, through idle curiosity, at the slate on which visitors' names were inscribed. What did I see there? By the side of my own name, actually touching it, was Wilde's. I have said that I was thirsting to be alone, so I took the sponge and rubbed my name out. Before reaching the railway station, however, I was not quite sure that a little cowardice did not underlie that act, so at once retracing my steps I had my bag taken upstairs and wrote my name on the slate again. In the 3 years since I had seen him, for I can hardly count a short meeting in Florence the year before, Wilde had certainly changed. One felt that there was less tenderness in his look, that there was something harsh in his laughter and a madness in his joy. He seemed, at the same time, to be more sure of pleasing and less ambitious to succeed therein. He had grown reckless, hardened, and conceited. Strangely enough, he no longer spoke in fables, and during several days that I tarried there I was not once able to draw the shortest tale from him. My first impression was one of astonishment at finding him in Algeria. "Oh," he said to me, "just now I am fleeing from art. I want only to adore the sun." Have you ever noticed how the sun detests thought? The sun always causes thought to withdraw itself and take refuge in the shade. Thought dwelt in Egypt originally, but the sun conquered Egypt, then it lived for a long time in Greece, and the sun conquered Greece, then in Italy, and then in France. Nowadays all thought is driven back as far as Norway and Russia, places where the sun never goes. The sun is jealous of art. To adore the sun, that was, for him, to adore life. Wilde's lyrical adoration was fast becoming a frenzied madness. A fatality led him on, he could not and would not withdraw himself from it. He seemed to devote all his zeal and all his worth to overrating his destiny, and overreaching himself. "My special duty," he used to say, "is to plunge madly into amusement." He used to make a point of searching for pleasure as one faces an appointed duty. Nietzsche surprised me less, on a later occasion, because I had heard Wilde say, "No, not happiness. Certainly not happiness. Pleasure. One must always set one's heart upon the most tragic." He would walk about the streets of Algiers preceded, escorted, and followed by an extraordinary mob of young ruffians. He talked to them all, regarded them all with equal delight, and threw them money recklessly. I hope to have thoroughly demoralized this town, he told me. I thought of Flaubert's saying when he was asked what kind of reputation he most desired, that of being a demoralizer. He replied. In the face of all this I was filled with astonishment, admiration, and alarm. I knew of his shaky position, the enmities he had created, and the attacks which were being made upon him, and I knew what dark unrest lay hidden beneath his outward pretense of pleasure. On one of those last evenings in Algiers, Wilde seemed to have made up his mind not to say a single serious word. At last I became somewhat annoyed at the exaggerated wit of his paradoxes, and I said to him, "You have got something better to talk about than this nonsense. You are talking to me as if I were the public. You ought rather to talk to the public as you know so well how to talk to your friends. Why is it your plays are not better? The best that is in you, you talk, why do you not write it?" "Oh, well," he cried immediately, "my plays are not good, I know, and I don't trouble about that, but if you only knew how much amusement they afford. They are nearly all the results of a bet. So was Dorian Gray. I wrote that in a few days because a friend of mine declared that I could not write a novel. Writing bores me so." Oscar Wilde, 1893. Then, turning suddenly towards me, he said, "Would you like to know the great drama of my life? It is that I have put my genius into my life, I have put only my talent into my works." It was only too true. The best of his writing is but a poor reflection of his brilliant conversation. Those who have heard him talk find him disappointing to read. Dorian Gray in its conception was a wonderful story, far superior to La Peau de Chagrin, and far more significant. Alas! When written, what a masterpiece spoiled! In his most delightful tales literary influence makes itself too much felt. However graceful they may be, one notices too much literary effort, affectation and delicacy of phrase, to conceal the beauty of the first conception of them. One feels in them, and one cannot help feeling in them, the three periods of their generation. The first idea contained in them is very beautiful, simple, profound, and certain to make itself heard. A kind of latent necessity holds the parts firmly together, but from that point the gift stops. The development of the parts is done in an artificial manner, there is a lack of arrangement about them, and when Wilde elaborates his sentences and endeavors to give them their full value, he does so by overloading them prodigiously with tiny conceits and quaint and trifling fancies. The result is that one's emotion is held at bay, and the dazzling of the surface so blinds one's eyes and mind, that the deep central emotion is lost. He spoke of returning to London, as a well-known peer was insulting him, challenging him, and taunting him with running away. "But if you go back, what will happen?" I asked him. "Do you know the risk you are running?" "It is best never to know," he answered. "My friends are extraordinary, they beg me to be careful." Careful? But can I be careful? That would be a backward step. I must go on as far as possible. I cannot go much further. Something is bound to happen, something else. Here he broke off, and the next day he left for England. The rest of the story is well known. That something else was hard labor. I have invented nothing, nor altered anything, in the last few sentences I have quoted. Wilde's words are fixed in my mind, and, I might almost say, in my ears. I do not say that Wilde clearly saw the prison opening to receive him, but I do assert that the great and unexpected event which astonished and upset London, suddenly changing Oscar Wilde from accuser into accused, did not cause him any surprise. The newspapers, which chose to see in him only a buffoon, misrepresented, as far as they could, the position taken up for his defense, even to the extent of wresting all meaning from it. Perhaps some day in the far future it will be seemly to lift this dreadful trial out of the mire, but not yet. 1. An ideal husband at the Haymarket and the importance of being earnest at the St. James's. Possibly Lady Windermere's fan or a woman of no importance was being played at a suburban theatre at the same time. 2. Gide first wrote Euphume but altered it to euphemism on republishing his study in pretexts. Euphuism or extreme nicety in language seems to be more appropriate in the present case than euphemism or a softening of offensive expressions. 3. For the crimson flower of our life is eaten by the cankerworm of truth, and no hand can gather up the fallen withered petals of the rose of youth. As soon as he came out of prison, Oscar Wilde went back to France. At Bourneville, a quiet little village near Dieppe, a certain Sebastian Melmoth took up his abode. It was he. As I had been the last of his French friends to see him, I wanted to be the first to greet him on his return to liberty, and as soon as I could find out his address I hastened to him. I arrived about midday without having previously announced my proposed visit. M. Melmoth, whom T.1, with warm cordiality invited to Dieppe fairly frequently, was not expected back till the evening. He did not return till midnight. It was as cold as winter. The weather was atrocious. The whole day I wandered about the deserted beach in low spirits and bored to death. How could Wilde have chosen Bourneville to live in, I wondered. It was positively mournful. Night came, and I went back to the hotel to engage a room, the same hotel where Melmoth was living. Indeed, it was the only one in the place. The hotel, which was clean and pleasantly situated, catered only for second-class boarders, inoffensive folk enough, with whom I had to dine. Rather poor company for Melmoth, I thought. Fortunately I had a book to read, but it was a gloomy evening, and at 11 o'clock I was just going to abandon my intention of waiting up for him when I heard the rumbling of carriage wheels. M. Melmoth had arrived, benumbed with cold. He had lost his overcoat on the way. And, now that he came to think of it, he remembered that a peacock's feather which his servant had brought him the previous evening was a bad omen, and had clearly foretold some misfortune about to befall him, Luckily it was no worse. But as he was shivering with cold, the hotel was set busy to warm some whiskey for him. He hardly said "How do you do" to me. In the presence of others, at least, he did not wish to appear to be at all moved. And my own emotion was almost immediately stilled on finding Sebastian Melmoth so plainly like the Oscar Wilde of old, no longer the frenzied poet of Algeria, but the sweet Wilde of the days before the crisis, and I found myself taken back not 2 years, but 4 or 5. There was the same dreamy look, the same amused smile, the same voice. He occupied 2 rooms, the best in the hotel, and he had arranged them with great taste. Several books lay on the table, and among them he showed me my own Neuriches Terrestres, which had been published lately. A pretty Gothic Virgin stood on a high pedestal in a dark corner. Presently we sat down near the lamp, Wilde drinking his grog in little sips. I noticed, now that the light was better, that the skin of his face had become red and common-looking, and his hands even more so, though they still bore the same rings. One to which he was especially attached had in a reversible bezel an Egyptian scarabæus in lapis lazuli. His teeth were dreadfully decayed. We began chatting, and I reminded him of our last meeting in Algiers, and asked him if he remembered that I had almost foretold the approaching catastrophe. "Did you not know," I said, "almost for certain what was awaiting you in England? You saw the danger and rushed headlong into it, did you not?" Here I think I cannot do better than copy out the pages on which I wrote shortly afterwards as much as I could remember of what he said. "Oh, naturally," he replied, "of course I knew that there would be a catastrophe, either that or something else, I was expecting it. There was but one end possible. Just imagine. To go any further was impossible, and that state of things could not last. That is why there had to be some end to it, you see. Prison has completely changed me, too. I was relying on it for that. Is terrible. He cannot understand that. He cannot understand that I am not taking up the same existence again. He accuses the others of having changed me, but one must never take up the same existence again. My life is like a work of art. An artist never begins the same work twice, or else it shows that he has not succeeded. My life before prison was as successful as possible. Now all that is finished and done with." He lighted a cigarette and went on, "The public is so dreadful that it knows a man only by the last thing he has done. If I were to go back to Paris now, people would see in me only the convict. I do not want to show myself again before I have written a play. Till then I must be left alone and undisturbed." And he added abruptly, "Did I not do well to come here? My friends wanted me to go to the south to recruit, because at first I was quite worn out. But I asked them to find me, in the north of France, a very small place at the seaside, where I should see no one, where it was very cold and there was hardly ever any sun. Did I not do well to come and live at Bernaville? Outside the weather was frightful. Here everyone is most good to me, the cure especially. I am so fond of the little church, and, would you believe it, it is called Notre Dame de l'Is, 3. Now, is not that charming? And now I know that I can never leave Berneval, because only this morning the cure offered me a perpetual seat in the choir stalls. And the custom house men, poor fellows, are so bored here with nothing to do, that I asked them if they had not anything to read, and now I am giving them all the Elder Dumas novels. So I must stay here, you see. And the children, oh, the children, they adore me. On the day of the Queen's Jubilee I gave a grand fete and a big dinner, when I had 40 children from the school, all of them, and the schoolmaster, to celebrate it. Is not that absolutely charming? You know that I admire the Queen very much. I always have her portrait with me. And he showed me her portrait by Nicholson, pinned on the wall. I got up to look at it. A small bookshelf was close to it, and I began glancing at the books. I wanted to lead Wilde on to talk to me in a more serious vein. I sat down again, and rather timidly asked him if he had read Souvenirs de la Maison des Morts. He gave me no direct answer, but began, Russian writers are extraordinary. What makes their books so great is the pity they put into them. You know how fond I used to be of Madame Bovary, but Flaubert would not admit pity into his work, and that is why it has a petty and restrained character about it. It is sense of pity by means of which a work gains in expanse, and by which it opens up a boundless horizon. Do you know, my dear fellow, it was pity that prevented me from killing myself. During the first 6 months I was dreadfully unhappy, so utterly miserable that I wanted to kill myself. But what kept me from doing so was looking at the others, and seeing that they were as unhappy as I was, and feeling sorry for them. Oh, dear! What a wonderful thing pity is, and I never knew it. He was speaking in a low voice without any excitement. Have you ever learned how wonderful a thing pity is? For my part I thank God every night, yes, on my knees I thank God for having taught it to me. I went into prison with a heart of stone, thinking only of my own pleasure, but now my heart is utterly broken, pity has entered into my heart. I have learned now that pity is the greatest and most beautiful thing in the world. And that is why I cannot bear ill will towards those who caused my suffering and those who condemned me, no, nor to any one, because without them I should not have known all that. Writes me terrible letters. He says he does not understand me, that he does not understand that I do not wish everyone ill, and that everyone has been horrid to me. No, he does not understand me. He cannot understand me any more. But I keep on telling him that in every letter, we cannot follow the same road. He has his, and it is beautiful, I have mine. His is that of Alcibiades, mine is now that of Saint Francis of Assisi. Do you know Saint Francis of Assisi? A wonderful man. Would you like to give me a great pleasure? Send me the best life of Saint Francis you can find. I promised it to him. He went on, yes, afterwards we had a charming prison governor, oh, quite a charming man, but for the first 6 months I was dreadfully unhappy. There was a governor of the prison, a Jew, who was very harsh, because he was entirely lacking in imagination. This last expression, spoken very quickly, was irresistibly funny, and, as I laughed heartily, he laughed too, repeated it, and then said, he did not know what to imagine in order to make us suffer. Now, you shall see what a lack of imagination he showed. You must know that in prison we are allowed to go out only 1 hour a day, then, we walk in a courtyard, round and round, one behind the other, and we are absolutely forbidden to say a word. Warders watch us, and there are terrible punishments for anyone caught talking. Those who are in prison for the first time are spotted at once, because they do not know how to speak without moving their lips. I had already been in prison 6 weeks and I had not spoken a word to anyone, not to a soul, for one evening we were walking as usual, one behind the other, during the hour's exercise, when suddenly behind me I heard my name called. It was the prisoner who followed me, and he said, "Oscar Wilde, I pity you, because you must suffer more than we do." Then I made a great effort not to be noticed. I thought I was going to faint, and I said without turning round, "No, my friend, we all suffer alike." And from that day I no longer had a desire to kill myself. We talked in that way for several days. I knew his name and what he had done. His name was P. He was such a good fellow, oh, so good. But I had not yet learned to speak without moving my lips, and one evening, C.3.3. C.3.3 was myself, C.3.3. And a .4.8. Step out of the ranks. Then we stood out, and the warder said, "You will both have to go before the governor." And as pity had already entered into my heart, my only fear was for him. In fact, I was even glad that I might suffer for his sake. But the governor was quite terrible. He had P. in first. He was going to question us separately, because you must know that the punishment is not the same for the one who speaks first, and for the one who answers. The punishment of the one who speaks first is double that of the other. As a rule, the first has 15 days solitary confinement, and the second has 8 days only. Then the governor wanted to know which of us had spoken first, and naturally P., good fellow that he was, said it was he. And afterwards, when the governor had me in to question me, I, of course, said it was I. Then the governor got very red because he could not understand it. But P. also says that it was he who began it. I cannot understand it. I cannot understand it. Think of it, my dear fellow, he could not understand it. He became very much embarrassed and said, "But I have already given him 15 days," and then he added, "Anyhow, if that is the case, I shall give you both 15 days. Is not that extraordinary?" That man had not a spark of imagination. 5. Wilde was vastly amused at what he was saying, and laughed. He was happy telling stories. "And, of course," he continued, after the 15 days we were much more anxious to speak to one another than before. You do not know how sweet that is, to feel that one is suffering for another. Gradually, as we did not go in the same order each day, I was able to talk to each of the others, to all of them, every one of them. I knew each one's name and each one's history, and when each was due to be released. And to each one I said, when you get out of prison, the first thing you must do is to go to the post office, and there you will find a letter for you with some money. And so in that way I still know them, because I keep up my friendship with them. And there is something quite delightful in them. Would you believe it, already 3 of them have been to see me here. Is not that quite wonderful? The successor of the harsh governor was a very charming man, oh, remarkably so, and most considerate to me. You cannot imagine how much good it did me in prison that Salome, 6, was being played in Paris just at that time. In prison, it had been entirely forgotten that I was a literary person, but when they saw that my play was a success in Paris, they said to one another, "Well, but that is strange, he has talent, then." And from that moment they let me have all the books I wanted to read. 7. I thought, at first, that what would please me most would be Greek literature, so I asked for Sophocles, but I could not get a relish for it. Then I thought of the Fathers of the Church, but I found them equally uninteresting. And suddenly I thought of Dante. Oh, Dante! I read Dante every day, in Italian, and all through, but neither the Purgatorio nor the Paradiso seemed written for me. It was his Inferno above all that I read. How could I help liking it? Cannot you guess? Hell, we were in it, hell, that was prison. 8. That same evening he told me a clever story about Judas, and of his proposed drama on Pharaoh. Next day he took me to a charming little house, 9, about 200 yards from the hotel, which he had rented and was beginning to furnish. It was there that he wanted to write his plays, his Pharaoh first, and then one called Ahab and Jezebel, he pronounced it Isabel, which he related to me admirably. The carriage which was to take me away was waiting, and Wilde got into it to accompany me part of the way. He began talking to me again about my book, and praised it, though with some slight reserve, I thought. At last the carriage stopped, he bade me goodbye, and was just going to get out, when he suddenly said, "Listen, my dear friend, you must promise me one thing. Your Neuriches Terrestres is good, very good, but promise me you will never write a capital I again." And as I seemed scarcely to understand what he meant, he finished up by saying, "In art, you see, there is no first person." 1. A literary friend who, a few years later, in collaboration with another, translated Dorian Gray into French. 2. No more beautiful life has any man lived, no more beautiful life could any man live than Oscar Wilde lived during the short period I knew him in prison. He wore upon his face an eternal smile, sunshine was on his face, sunshine of some sort must have been in his heart. People say he was not sincere, He was the very soul of sincerity when I knew him. If he did not continue that life after he left prison, then the forces of evil must have been too strong for him. But he tried, he honestly tried, and in prison he succeeded. From a letter written to the translator. 3. An archaic French word from the Latin Laetitia. 4. Within the last few years the stringency of this regulation has been somewhat relaxed, and it is in the discretion of the governor to allow conversation at certain times. The Governor of Reading Prison, in the appendix to the report of the Commissioners for the year ending the 31st of March, 1901, stated, "The privilege of talking at exercise is much appreciated by the prisoners. They walk and talk in a quiet and orderly manner, and there have been no reports for misbehavior." 5. Solitary confinement does not mean in a dark cell. The prisoner still remains in his own cell, but is debarred from exercising with the other prisoners, or accompanying them to divine service. The confinement is not consecutive, but applies to every alternate day only. Thus, a prisoner sentenced to 7 days bread and water, or solitary confinement, does but 4 days. 6. Salome was played in Paris early in 1896. 7. Oscar Wilde found the prison library quite unable to satisfy his wants, and he was allowed to receive books from outside. Such books are then added to the prison library. Magazines are forbidden, but novels allowed. In a letter written from prison early in 1897, Oscar Wilde said that he felt a horror of returning to the world without possessing a single volume of his own, and suggested that some of his friends might like to give him some books. "You know what kind of books I want," he says: Flaubert, Stevenson, Baudelaire, Maeterlinck, Dumas Perrier, Keats, Marlowe, Chatterton, Coleridge, Anatole France, Théophile Gautier, Dante, and Goethe, and so on. 8. During the last 3 months or so of his imprisonment he did no work whatever beyond writing De Profundis and keeping his cell clean. He was allowed gas in his cell up to a late hour, when it was turned down but not turned out. As everything he wrote was examined by the governor, naturally the prison system is not attacked with the same vehemence in De Profundis as it is in the Ballad of Reading Gaol. 9. This was the Chalet Burbat where Wilde lived from July to October, 1897. 4. What else had I to do but love you? God's own mother was less dear to me, and less dear the Cytherean rising like an argent lily from the sea. On returning to Paris I went to give news of him to said to me, but all that is quite absurd. He is quite incapable of bearing the ennui. I know him so well. He writes to me every day. I also am of opinion that he ought to finish his play first, but after that he will come back here. He has never done anything good in solitude, he needs to be constantly drawn out of himself. It is by my side that he has written all his best work. Besides, just look at his last letter. He thereupon read it to me. In it Wilde begged to let him finish his Pharaoh in peace, but, in effect, the letter implied that as soon as his play was written he would come back, he would find him again, and it ended with these boastful words, "And then I shall be once more the king of life." V rudderless, we drift athwart a tempest, and when once the storm of youth is past, without lyre, without lute or chorus, death the silent pilot comes at last. The grave at Bagno. And a short time afterwards, Wilde went back to Paris. 1. His play was not written, it will never be written now. Society well knows what steps to take when it wants to crush a man, and it has means more subtle than death. Wilde had suffered too grievously for the last 2 years, and in too submissive a manner, and his will had been broken. For the first few months he might still have entertained illusions, but he soon gave them up. It was as though he had signed his abdication. Nothing remained in his shattered life but a mouldy ruin, painful to contemplate, of his former self. At times he seemed to wish to show that his brain was still active. Humor there was, but it was far-fetched, forced, and threadbare. I met him again on 2 occasions only. One evening on the boulevards, where I was walking with G, I heard my name called. I turned round and saw Wilde. Ah! How changed he was! If I appear again before writing my play, the world will refuse to see in me anything except the felon he had once said to me. He had appeared again, without his play, and as he found certain doors closed in his face, he no longer sought admission anywhere. He prowled. Friends, at different times, tried to save him, too. They did all they could think of, and were for taking him to Italy, but he eluded their efforts, and began to drift back. Among those who had remained faithful for the longest time, some had often told me that Wilde was no longer to be seen, and I was somewhat uneasy, I admit, at seeing him again, and what is more, in a place where so many people might pass. Wilde was sitting at a table outside a cafe. He ordered 2 cocktails for G, and myself. I was going to sit opposite to him in such a way as to turn my back to the passers-by, but Wilde noticed this movement, which he took as an impulse of absurd shame. He was not entirely mistaken, I must admit, and said, "Oh, sit here, near me," pointing to a chair at his side. "I am so much alone just now." Wilde was still well dressed, but his hat was not so glossy, his collar was of the same shape, but it was not so clean, and the sleeves of his coat were slightly frayed at the edges. "When I used to meet Verlaine in days gone by," he continued with an outburst of pride, "I was never ashamed of being seen with him. I was rich, light-hearted, and covered with glory, but I felt that to be seen with him was an honor, even when Verlaine was drunk." Then, fearing to bore G, I think, he suddenly changed his mood, tried to be witty and to make jokes. In the effort he became gloomy. My recollections here are dreadfully sad. At last my friend and I got up. Wilde insisted on paying for the drinks, and I was about to say goodbye, when he took me aside, and, with an air of great embarrassment, said in a low voice, "I say, I must tell you, I am absolutely without a penny." 3. Some days afterwards I saw him again, and for the last time. I do not want to repeat more than one word of our conversation. He told me of his troubles, of the impossibility of carrying out, or even of beginning, a piece of work, for sadly I reminded him of the promise he had made not to show himself in Paris without having finished one book. Ah! I began, why did you leave Berneval so soon, when you ought to have stayed there so long? I cannot say that I am angry with you, but, he interrupted me, laid his hand on mine, looked at me with his most sorrowful look, and said, you must not be angry with one who has been crushed. 5. Oscar Wilde died in a shabby little hotel in the Rue des Beaux-Arts. 7 persons followed the hearse, and even they did not all accompany the funeral procession to the end. On the coffin were some flowers and some artificial wreaths, only one of which, I am told, bore any inscription. It was from the proprietor of the hotel, and on it were these words, Amon locator. 1. The representatives of his family were willing to guarantee Wilde a very good position if he would consent to certain stipulations, one of which was that he should never see, again. He was either unable or unwilling to accept the conditions. 2. In October, 1897, he stayed with friends at the Villa Gindis, Posillipo, and was in Naples till the end of the year, or the beginning of 1898, when he went to Paris. In the following year he went to the south of France, Nice, for the spring, but was back in June or July. He went also to Switzerland in 1899 and stayed some time at Gland. 3. Gide says that Wilde's words were Je suis absolument sans ressources, which, I think, need not mean more than a temporary embarrassment. I have been at some pains to find out what the actual circumstances were, and I am able to state the following facts on the authority of Lord Alfred Douglas. When Mr. Wilde came out of prison, the sum of £800 was subscribed for him by his friends. Lord Alfred Douglas gave or sent Mr. Wilde, in the last 12 months of his life, cheques for over £600, as he can show by his bank book, in addition to ready money gifts, and several others gave him at various times amounts totaling up to several hundreds of pounds. It is true Lord Alfred Douglas writes, he was always hard up and short of money, but that was because he was incurably extravagant and reckless. I think these facts ought to be known in justice to myself and many others of his friends, all poor men. In another letter Lord Alfred Douglas says that Mr. Wilde, when he was well off, before his disaster, was the most generous of men. After 1897 received also large sums of money as advance fees for plays which he never finished. I hope Lord Alfred Douglas continues, you will not think that I blame him, or have any grievance against him on any account. What I gave him I considered I owed him, as he had often lent and given me money before he came to grief. I was delighted that he should have it, and I wish I had had time to give him more. It was not, however, till after the death of his father, that Lord Alfred Douglas was in a position to help Mr. Wilde to the extent that he did, and Mr. Wilde died within a few months of the death of Lord Queensberry. Lord Alfred Douglas adds that he thinks it is about time that some of the poisonous nonsense which has been written about Mr. Wilde should be qualified by a little fact. It must be remembered, however, that large as the sums of money were which Mr. Wilde received during the last few years of his life, they would not appear so to him, as in the days of his highest success he was receiving several thousands a year from his plays and other works. It is since the first sheets of this book passed through the press that I have been favoured with the information that Lord Alfred Douglas has been good enough to give me, and I now wish to qualify the statement in my introductory remarks that Mr. Wilde died in poverty. It would be more accurate to say in comparative poverty. 4. 2 plays produced in London shortly before his death have been attributed to Oscar Wilde. One of these, The Tyranny of Tez, does not contain a single line of his. The other is Mr. and Mrs. Daintree, the plot of which was originally Oscar Wilde's, and he sketched out the scenario. The play was then sold to Mr. Frank Harris, who has always acknowledged Wilde's share in it, but the piece was entirely transformed, and except one or two of the situations in it there was very little left of Wilde's idea. Referring to such works as the translations of Cekne Murt Pars and the Satyricon which have been issued under Oscar Wilde's name, Mr. Robert Ross, the editor of De Profundis, writes, "No one can produce even a scrap of MS in the author's handwriting of these so-called last works." 5. Scandals used to lend charm, or at least interest, to a man, now they crush him. An Ideal Husband, Act I to Oscar Wilde, author of Ravener. By Augustus M. Moore. No Marsyas am I, whose singing came to challenge King Apollo at a test, but a love-wearied singer at the best. The myrtle leaves are all that I can claim, while on thy brow there burns a crown of flame, upon thy shield Italia's eagle crest. Content am I with Lesbian leaves to rest, guard thou thy laurels and thy mother's name. I buried love within the rose I meant to deck the fillet of thy muse's hair. I take this wild flower, grown against her feet, and kissing its half-open lips I swear, frail though it be and widowed of its scent, I plucked it for your sake and find it sweet. Moore Hall, September, 1878. From the Irish Monthly, Volume 6, Number 65. List of published writings of Oscar Wilde. Dublin University Magazine, September, 1876. Apologia. Poets and Poetry of the Century, edited by A. H. Miles, Volume 8, 1891, 1898. Artist, the. In Poems in Prose. Artist's Dream, the. Green Room, Routledge's Christmas Annual, 1880. Ave Imperatrix. A Poem on England. World, the 25th of August, 1880. Ave Maria. Cotabos, Michaelmas Term, 1879. Ballad of Reading Gaol, the. Leonard Smithus, 1898, February, 7th edition, 1899. Birthday of the Infanta, the. Le Figaro Illustre, Christmas Number. In a House of Pomegranates. Canterville Ghost, the. Illustrations by F. H. Townsend. Court and Society Review, the 23rd of February, the 2nd of March, 1887. In Lord Arthur Saville's Crime and Other Stories. Case of Warder Martin, the Daily Chronicle, the 28th of May, 1897. Children in Prison. Murdoch and Company, 1898, February. Chinese Sage, a Speaker, the 8th of February, 1890. Conqueror of Time, the Time, April, 1879. Critic as Artist, the In Intentions. De Profundis. Methuen and Company, 1905, the 23rd of February, 4th edition, March, 1905. Decay of Lying, the A Dialogue. 19th century, January, 1889. In Intentions. Devoted Friend, the In the Happy Prince and Other Tales. Cotabos, Trinity Term, 1876. Disciple, the Spirit Lamp, the 6th of June, 1893. In Poems in Prose. Doer of Good, the In Poems in Prose. Dole of the King's Daughter, the Dublin University Magazine, June, 1876. Don't read this if you want to be happy today. Daily Chronicle, the 24th of March, 1898. Duchess of Padoue, the Privately printed for the author, America, 1883, 1. English Poetesses. Queen, the 8th of December, 1888. English Renaissance, Lecture on the G. Munro's Seaside Library, Volume 58, Number 1183. New York, the 19th of January, 1882. Ethics of Journalism, the Pall Mall Gazette, the 20th of September, 1925, 1894. Fascinating Book, A Woman's World, November, 1888. Fisherman and His Soul, the In a House of Pomegranates. Fragment from the Agamemnon of Aeschylus, a Cotabos, Hilary Term, 1877. From Spring Days to Winter, for Music. Dublin University Magazine, January, 1876. Graffiti d'Italia, Arona. Largo Maggiore. Month and Catholic Review, September, 1876. Graffiti d'Italia, San Miniato. Dublin University Magazine, March, 1876. Grave of Keats, the Burlington, January, 1881. Green Carnation, the Pall Mall Gazette, the 2nd of October, 1894. Grosvenor Gallery, the Dublin University Magazine, July, 1877. Guido Ferranti, Selection from the Duchess of Padoue. Werner's Readings and Recitations, New York, 1891. Happy Prince and Other Tales, the David Nutt, 1888, May, 1889, January, 1902, February. Hellas. Poets and Poetry of the Century. Edited by A. H. Miles, Volume 8, 1891, 1898. Harlot's House, The. 1885, 2, Hugh Misrandipure. See Tomb of Keats, The. House of Judgment, The. Spirit Lamp, the 17th of February, 1893. In Poems in Prose. House of Pomegranates, A. Osgood, McIlvaine and Company, 1891, November. House of Pomegranates, A. Reply to Criticism of Speaker, the 5th of December, 1891. Ideal Husband, An. Leonard Smithers and Company, 1899, July. Importance of Being Earnest, The. Leonard Smithers and Company, 1899, February. Impression de Matin. World, March 2, 1881, 3. Intentions. Osgood, McIlvaine and Company, 1891, May. New edition, 1894, 4. Keats' Love Letters, sonnet on the recent sale by auction of Dramatic Review, the 23rd of January, 1886. Keats' Sonnet on Blue. Century Guild Hobby Horse, July, 1886. La Belle Marguerite. Ballade du Moyen Age. Cotabos, Hilary Term, 1879. La Faute de la Lune. Poems and Lyrics of Nature, edited by E. W. Rinder, Walter Scott, 1894, May 9. The Woman's World. Edited by Oscar Wilde from November, 1887, to September, 1889. Reduced facsimile of the cover, 12 by 9 1/4. Lady Alroy. World, the 25th of May, 1887. In Lord Arthur Saville's Crime and Other Stories. Lady Windermere's Fan. Elkin Matthews and John Lane, 1893, November 8. Le Jardin des Tuileries. In a Good Cause, Wells Gardner, Darton and Company, 1885, June. L'Envoi. Rose Leaf and Apple Leaf, by Rennell Rodd. J. M. Stoddart and Company, Philadelphia, 1882. Le Réveillon. Poems and Lyrics of Nature. Edited by E. W. Rinder. Walter Scott, 1894, May 9. Les Silhouettes. Poems and Lyrics of Nature. Edited by E. W. Rinder. Walter Scott, 1894, May 9. Libel Action against Lord Queensberry, The. Evening News, the 5th of April, 1895. Libertatis Sacra Fames. World, the 10th of November, 1880, 5. Literary and Other Notes. Woman's World, November, December, 1887, January to March, 1888. London Models. Illustrations by Harper Pennington. English Illustrated Magazine, January, 1889. Lord Arthur Saville's Crime. A Story of She-Romancy. Illustrations by F. H. Townsend. Court and Society Review, the 11th of May, 2018, 25, 1887. In Lord Arthur Saville's Crime and Other Stories. Lord Arthur Saville's Crime and Other Stories. Osgood, McIlvaine and Company, 1891, July. Lotus Leaves. Irish Monthly, February, 1877. Magdalen Walks. Irish Monthly, April, 1878. Master, the. In Poems and Prose. Model Millionaire, the. World, the 22nd of June, 1887. In Lord Arthur Saville's Crime and Other Stories. More Radical Ideas on Dress Reform. Pall Mall Gazette, the 11th of November, 1884. Mr. Pater's last volume. Speaker, the 22nd of March, 1890. Mr. Whistler's 10 o'clock. Pall Mall Gazette, the 21st of February, 1885. New Helen, the. Time, July, 1879. New Remorse, the. Spirit Lamp, the 6th of December, 1892. Night Vision, a Cotabos, Hilary Term, 1877. Nightingale and the Rose, the. La Plume, the 15th of December, 1900. In the Happy Prince and Other Tales. Note on Some Modern Poets, A Woman's World, December, 1888. Oh, Beautiful Star. 3 verses of Under the Balcony. Set to music by Lawrence Kelly. Robert Cox and Company, 1892. On Criticism, with some remarks on the importance of doing nothing. 19th Century, July, September, 1890. In Intentions. Pen, Pencil, and Poison, a Study. Fortnightly Review, January, 1889. In Intentions. Phrases and Philosophies for the Use of the Young. Chameleon, 1894, December. Fdro. See to Sarah Bernhardt. Picture of Dorian Gray, the 13 chapters. Lippincott's Monthly Magazine, July, 1890. Picture of Dorian Gray, the 20 chapters. Ward, Locke and Company, 1891, July 1st. New edition, 1894, October 1st. Picture of Dorian Gray, the. Replies to Criticism of. Daily Chronicle, the 2nd of July, 1890. Scott's Observer, the 12th of July, the 2nd of August, 2016, 1890. Poems. David Bogue, 1881, July. 5th edition, 1882. Elkin Matthews and John Lane, 1892, the 26th of May. Poems in Prose. Fortnightly Review, July, 1894. Irish Monthly, December, 1877. Portia. World, the 14th of January, 1880. Portrait of Mr. W. H., the. Blackwood's Edinburgh Magazine, July, 1889, 6. Preface to Dorian Gray, A Fortnightly Review, March, 1891. Puppets and Actors. Daily Telegraph, February, 1892, 7. Queen Henrietta Maria, Charles I, Act 3. World, the 16th of July, 1879. Ravenna. T. Shrimpton and Son, Oxford, 1878, June. Remarkable Rocket, the In the Happy Prince and Other Tales. Requiescat. Dublin Verses, by members of Trinity College. Elkin Matthews, 1895. Rise of Historical Criticism, the Privately printed. America, 1905, 8. Rose of Love and With a Rose's Thorns. See Roses and Rue. Midsummer Dreams, Summer Number of Society, July, 1885. Salome, French edition. Librairie de l'Art Indépendant, Paris, 1893, the 22nd of February. Salome, English edition. Elkin Matthews and John Lane, 1894, February the 9th. Sauve Saturniatellus. Irish Monthly, June, 1877. Selfish Giant, the In the Happy Prince and Other Tales. Scène Artistique, or The Artist's Dream. See Artist's Dream, the Shakespeare and Stage Costume. 19th Century, May, 1885. In Intentions. Some Cruelties of Prison Life. See Case of Warder Martin, The and Children in Prison. Some Literary Notes. Woman's World, January to June, 1889. Relation of Dress to Art, the Pall Mall Gazette, the 28th of February, 1885. Soul of Man Under Socialism, the Fortnightly Review, February, 1891, 9. Sphinx, the Elkin Matthews and John Lane, 1894, the 29th of September. Sphinx Without a Secret, the See Lady Alroy. Star Child, the In a House of Pomegranates. Teacher of Wisdom, the In Poems in Prose. Theocritus. Ballads and Rondos. Selected by Gleason White. Walter Scott Publishing Company, 1889, the 30th of June, 10. Kotabos, Michaelmas Term, 1876. To Milton. Poets and Poetry of the Century, edited by A. H. Miles, Volume 8, 1891, 1898. To my wife, with a copy of my poems. Book Song, Elliot Stock, 1893. To Sarah Bernhardt. World, the 11th of June, 1879. Tomb of Keats, the Irish Monthly, July, 1877. True Function and Value of Criticism, the See Critic as Artist, the and on Criticism. True Knowledge, the Irish Monthly, September, 1876, 11. Truth of Masks, the See Shakespeare and Stage Costume. Under the Balcony. Shakespearean Show Book, the 29th of May, 1884. Co. Beautiful Star. Enement de Numbers Jour. Court and Society Review, the 13th of December, 1887. See New Remorse, the Vera, or the Nihilists. Privately printed for the author, America, 1882. Vita Nuova. See Wasted Days, from a picture painted by Miss V.T. Kotabos, Michaelmas Term, 1877. Whistler, Correspondence with World, the 14th of November, 1883, the 25th of February, 1885, the 24th of November, 1886. Truth, the 9th of January, 1890. Whistler's Lectures Reviewed. See Mr. Whistler's 10 o'clock and Relation of Dress to Art, the with a copy of A House of Pomegranates. Book Song, Eliot Stock, 1893. Woman of No Importance, A. John Lane, The Bodley Head, 1894, October the 9th. Woman's World, the edited by Oscar Wilde, 1887-9. Castle and Company Young King, the illustrations by Bernard Partridge. Ladies Pictorial, Christmas number, 1888. In a House of Pomegranates. 1. The title page reads, The Duchess of Padua, a tragedy of the 16th century by Oscar Wilde, author of Vera etc. Written in Paris in the 19th century. Privately printed as manuscript. The 15th of March, 1883 AD. The cover is inscribed up to 20 copies were printed, of which one only is known to exist in England, the property of Mr. Robert Ross. It is in grey paper wrappers, 8 vo. pp. 122. The play was acted in America in 1883 by the late Lawrence Barrett, shortly before his death. It is sometimes known as Guido Ferranti. 2. The original publication of The Harlot's House has not yet been traced. The approximate date is known by a parody on the poem, called The Public House, which appeared in the Sporting Times of 13 June, 1885. In 1904 a privately printed edition, on folio paper, with 5 illustrations by Althair Giles, was issued by the Mathurin Press, London. In 1905 another edition was privately printed in London, pp. 8, wrappers. 3. See Notes and Queries, Series 9, Volume 12, page 85. 4. Continental edition issued by Messrs. Heinemann and Bailestier in the English Library No. 54. 1891, 5. See Sonnets of This Century. Edited by William Sharp. Walter Scott Publishing Company, 1888, the 22nd of March. 6. Early in 1894, Messrs. Elkin Matthews and John Lane announced as being in preparation, The Incomparable and Ingenious History of Mr. W. H. being the true secret of Shakespeare's sonnets, now for the first time here fully set forth. With initial letters and cover design by Charles Ricketts. On the evening of his arrest, the 5th of April, 1895, the publishers returned the MS to Mr. Wilde's house, and it is said to have been stolen from there a few hours later. 7. See Saturday Review, the 2nd of July, 1892. 8. The authenticity of this work is not vouched for. 9. It was the author's wish that the soul of man under socialism should be known as the soul of man, and by this title he himself refers to it in De Profundis. A privately printed edition was published by Mr. Arthur L. Humphreys under this title in 1895, and again in 1904 in Sebastian Melmoth. It appeared also in Wilshire's Magazine, Toronto, Canada, for June, 1902, and, under its original title, in a pirated edition issued in London, 1904, and in a beautiful edition published by Mr. Thos. B. Mosher, of Portland, Maine, USA, April, 1905. 10. See Literature, the 8th of December, 1900. 11. Reprinted in Dublin Verses, 1895, and The Tablet, the 8th of December, 1900. Note: in the foregoing list the following particulars are given: titles of books with name of publisher and date of publication of each edition. Contributions to magazines and periodicals whether reprinted in book form later or not. Poems which have been reprinted in collections of verse of later date than Bogue's edition of the poems 1881. These will be found under their respective titles, but when a poem has been included in more than one such collection the reference is given, as a rule, to the book of earliest date. The publications of Messrs. Elkin Matthews and John Lane, and of Mr. John Lane were issued simultaneously in America by Messrs. Copeland and Day, of Boston. De Profundis was published in America by Messrs. G. P. Putnam's Sons, of New York. 7 editions have been issued. The Decay of Lying, The Portrait of Mr. W. H., and The Soul of Man Under Socialism, appeared in the Eclectic Magazine of New York a few weeks after publication in this country. No notice is taken in this bibliography of many unauthorized and pirated reprints, and those works which have been falsely attributed to Mr. Wilde by unscrupulous publishers are all rejected. Of the latter The Priest and the Acolyte and translations of C.E. Murt Pars and the Satyricon of Petronius are examples. Books containing selections from the works of Oscar Wilde. Best of Oscar Wilde, the collection of poems and prose extracts. Collected by C. Herman. Brentano, New York, 1905, March. Epigrams and Aphorisms. Edited by G. H. Sargent. John W. Luce and Company, Boston, USA, 1905, July. Essays, Criticisms and Reviews. Now first collected. From the Woman's World. Privately printed. London, 1901. Oscariana. Epigrams. Arthur Humphreys, 1895, 1. Sebastian Melmoth, Selection from Prose Writings, and the Soul of Man. Arthur L. Humphreys, 1904, September. 1. Only one copy bore the publisher's name. The rest were issued as privately printed. The edition consisted of 25 copies only, but forged reprints are numerous. The selection of epigrams is said to have been made by Mrs. Wilde. Bibliographical notes on the English editions. A House of Pomegranates. The following is the author's own description of the decorative designs that make lovely this book of beautiful tales and of the delicate dreams that separate and herald each story. Mr. Shannon is the drawer of the dreams, and Mr. Ricketts is the subtle and fantastic decorator. Indeed, it is to Mr. Ricketts that the entire decorative design of the book is due, from the selection of the type and the placing of the ornamentation, to the completely beautiful cover that encloses the whole. The artistic beauty of the cover resides in the delicate tracing, arabesques, and massing of many coral red lines on a ground of white ivory, the color effect culminating in certain high gilt notes, and being made still more pleasurable by the overlapping band of moss green cloth that holds the book together. The Ballad of Reading Gaol. First edition, 8vo, pp. 31, 800, copies on handmade paper, and 30 on Japan vellum, February, 1898. Before the second edition was published, in March, the author made several alterations in the text. The third edition was 99 copies only, each signed by the author, bound in purple cloth sides, 4-2. Editions 4, 5, and 6, 1898. Are similar to the second edition, and the number of each edition is printed on the back of title page. The seventh edition, 1899, bears the author's name on the title page. It is the last of Smith's editions on handmade paper. All his subsequent editions are printed in a new type from stereotyped plates, on thick wove paper, and bear no number to distinguish the edition. They are all dated 1899. De Profundis. Of the first edition, 200 copies were printed on handmade paper at 21/ and 50 on Japan vellum at 42/. Of the ordinary 5/ edition, 4 impressions were issued within a month of publication. The Happy Prince and Other Tales. Of the first edition, 75 copies, 65 for sale, were printed on large paper with the plates in 2 states. Of the small paper copies, the first edition was published at 5/, the second and third at 3/6 each. An Ideal Husband and the Importance of Being Earnest. Each edition consists of 1,000 copies, 7/6 net, and 100 on large paper, 21/6 net. 12 copies of each, signed by the author, were issued on Japan vellum. Of this edition, number 4 of each play is in the British Museum. Intentions. First edition, 1891, 7/6, new edition, 1894, 3/6. Lady Windermere's Fan and a Woman of No Importance. with a specially designed binding to each volume by Charles Shannon. 500 copies, SM 427/6 net, and 50 copies large paper, 15/net. The Picture of Dorian Gray. Of the first edition, 250 copies on handmade paper, signed by the author, were issued at 21/, dated 1891. The small paper editions are not dated. The second, 1894, can be distinguished from the first, 1891, by the publisher's name, Ward, Lock and Bowden, Limited, on the title page. The published price of each was 6/. Poems. Boek's first, second and third editions are dated 1881, pp. 236. The fourth and fifth editions, 1882, have several alterations made by the author in the text, and contain 234 pages only. The edition published by Elkin Matthews and John Lane in 1892 consisted of 220 copies, 200 for sale, on handmade paper, with cover design by Charles Ricketts, price 15/. The text is a reprint of Boek's 1882 editions. Ravenna. Forged imitations of Messrs. Shrimpton and Sons edition are common. They can be distinguished from the originals by the omission of the Arras of Oxford University on cover and title page. Salome. The edition in French, limited to 600 copies, 500 for sale, printed in Paris, was published by the Librairie de l'Art Independent, Paris, and Messrs. Matthews and Lane, London, pp. 84, purple wrappers lettered in silver, 5/net. The English edition was translated by Lord Alfred Douglas and pictured by Aubrey Beardsley with 10 illustrations, title page, tailpiece, and cover design. 500 copies, small 4 to 15/net, 100 copies large paper, 30/net. The Sphinx. Decorated throughout in line and color and bound in a design by Charles Ricketts. 250 copies at £2/2/net, and 25 on large paper at £5/5/net. Translations of many of Oscar Wilde's works have appeared in French, German, Polish, Hungarian, Spanish, Italian, Russian, and other foreign languages. Full particulars of all editions will be included in a bibliography of Oscar Wilde by Walter Ledger and Stuart Mason, now in preparation. In preparation. The Sonnets of Oscar Wilde, now first collected. Edited, with notes, by Stuart Mason. Views and reviews: the uncollected prose writings and letters of Oscar Wilde. Edited by Stuart Mason. The bibliography of Oscar Wilde by Walter Ledger and Stuart Mason. ******* End of the project Gutenberg ebook Oscar Wilde, a study ******* Updated editions will replace the previous one, the old editions will be renamed. Creating the works from print editions not protected by U.S. copyright law means that no one owns a United States copyright in these works, so the Foundation, and you, can copy and distribute it in the United States without permission and without paying copyright royalties. Special rules, set forth in the general terms of use part of this license, apply to copying and distributing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol concept and trademark. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark, and may not be used if you charge for an ebook, except by following the terms of the trademark license, including paying royalties for use of the Project Gutenberg trademark. If you do not charge anything for copies of this ebook, complying with the trademark license is very easy. You may use this ebook for nearly any purpose such as creation of derivative works, reports, performances and research. Project Gutenberg ebooks may be modified and printed and given away. You may do practically anything in the United States with ebooks not protected by U.S. copyright law. Redistribution is subject to the trademark license, especially commercial redistribution. Start. Full license. The full Project Gutenberg license. Please read this before you distribute or use this work to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol mission of promoting the free distribution of electronic works. By using or distributing this work, or any other work associated in any way with the phrase Project Gutenberg, you agree to comply with all the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license available with this file or online at www.gutenberg.org/license. Section 1. General Terms of Use and Redistributing Project Gutenberg Trademark Symbol Electronic Works 1.0. By reading or using any part of this Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work, you indicate that you have read, understand, agree to and accept all the terms of this license and intellectual property, trademark/copyright, agreement. If you do not agree to abide by all the terms of this agreement, you must cease using and return or destroy all copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works in your possession. If you paid a fee for obtaining a copy of or access to a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work and you do not agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement, you may obtain a refund from the person or entity to whom you paid the fee as set forth in paragraph 1.e.8. 1.b Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark. It may only be used on or associated in any way with an electronic work by people who agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement. There are a few things that you can do with most Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works even without complying with the full terms of this agreement. See paragraph 1.c below. There are a lot of things you can do with Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works if you follow the terms of this agreement and help preserve free future access to Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. See paragraph 1.e below. 1.c. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the Foundation or PGLAF, owns a compilation copyright in the collection of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. Nearly all the individual works in the collection are in the public domain in the United States. If an individual work is unprotected by copyright law in the United States and you are located in the United States, we do not claim a right to prevent you from copying, distributing, performing, displaying or creating derivative works based on the work as long as all references to Project Gutenberg are removed. Of course, we hope that you will support the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol mission of promoting free access to electronic works by freely sharing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works in compliance with the terms of this agreement for keeping the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol name associated with the work. You can easily comply with the terms of this agreement by keeping this work in the same format with its attached full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license when you share it without charge with others. 1.d. The copyright laws of the place where you are located also govern what you can do with this work. Copyright laws in most countries are in a constant state of change. If you are outside the United States, check the laws of your country in addition to the terms of this agreement before downloading, copying, displaying, performing, distributing or creating derivative works based on this work or any other Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work. The Foundation makes no representations concerning the copyright status of any work in any country other than the United States. 1.e. Unless you have removed all references to Project Gutenberg, 1.e.1. The following sentence, with active links to, or other immediate access to, the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license must appear prominently whenever any copy of a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work, any work on which the phrase Project Gutenberg appears, or with which the phrase Project Gutenberg is associated, is accessed, displayed, performed, viewed, copied or distributed. This ebook is for the use of anyone anywhere in the United States and most other parts of the world at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this ebook or online at www.gutenberg.org. If you are not located in the United States, you will have to check the laws of the country where you are located before using this ebook. 1.e.2. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work is derived from texts not protected by U.S. copyright law, does not contain a notice indicating that it is posted with permission of the copyright holder, the work can be copied and distributed to anyone in the United States without paying any fees or charges. If you are redistributing or providing access to a work with the phrase Project Gutenberg associated with or appearing on the work, you must comply either with the requirements of paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 or obtain permission for the use of the work and the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark as set forth in paragraphs 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.3 If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work is posted with the permission of the copyright holder, your use and distribution must comply with both paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 and any additional terms imposed by the copyright holder. Additional terms will be linked to the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license for all works posted with the permission of the copyright holder found at the beginning of this work. 1.e.4. Do not unlink or detach or remove the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license terms from this work, or any files containing a part of this work or any other work associated with Project Gutenberg trademark symbol. 1.e.5. Do not copy, display, perform, distribute or redistribute this electronic work, or any part of this electronic work, without prominently displaying the sentence set forth in paragraph 1.e.1 with active links or immediate access to the full terms of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license. 1.e.6. You may convert to and distribute this work in any binary, compressed, marked up, non-proprietary or proprietary form, including any word processing or hypertext form. However, if you provide access to or distribute copies of a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work in a format other than plain vanilla ASCII or other format used in the official version posted on the official Project Gutenberg trademark symbol website, www.gutenberg.org, you must, at no additional cost, fee or expense to the user, provide a copy, a means of exporting a copy, or a means of obtaining a copy upon request, of the work in its original plain vanilla ASCII or other form. Any alternate format must include the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license as specified in paragraph 1.e.1. 1.e.7. Do not charge a fee for access to, viewing, displaying, performing, copying or distributing any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works unless you comply with paragraph 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.8. You may charge a reasonable fee for copies of or providing access to or distributing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works provided that you pay a royalty fee of 20% of the gross profits you derive from the use of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works calculated using the method you already use to calculate your applicable taxes. The fee is owed to the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark, but he has agreed to donate royalties under this paragraph to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Royalty payments must be paid within 60 days following each date on which you prepare, or are legally required to prepare, your periodic tax returns. Royalty payments should be clearly marked as such and sent to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation at the address specified in Section 4, Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. You provide a full refund of any money paid by a user who notifies you in writing, or by email, within 30 days of receipt that he does not agree to the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license. You must require such a user to return or destroy all copies of the works possessed in a physical medium and discontinue all use of and all access to other copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works. You provide, in accordance with paragraph 1.f.3, a full refund of any money paid for a work or a replacement copy, if a defect in the electronic work is discovered and reported to you within 90 days of receipt of the work. You comply with all other terms of this agreement for free distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works. 1.e.9. If you wish to charge a fee or distribute a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work or group of works on different terms than are set forth in this agreement, you must obtain permission in writing from the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the manager of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark. Contact the Foundation as set forth in Section 3 below. 1.f1.f.1. Project Gutenberg volunteers and employees expend considerable effort to identify, do copyright research on, transcribe and proofread works not protected by U.S. copyright law in creating the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol collection. Despite these efforts, Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works, and the medium on which they may be stored, may contain defects such as, but not limited to, incomplete, inaccurate or corrupt data, transcription errors, a copyright or other intellectual property infringement, a defective or damaged disk or other medium, a computer virus, or computer codes that damage or cannot be read by your equipment. 1.f.2. Limited warranty, disclaimer of damages, except for the right of replacement or refund described in paragraph 1.f.3, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark, and any other party distributing a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work under this agreement, disclaim all liability to you for damages, costs and expenses, including legal fees. You agree that you have no remedies for negligence, strict liability, breach of warranty or breach of contract except those provided in paragraph 1.f.3. You agree that the Foundation, the trademark owner, and any distributor under this agreement will not be liable to you for actual, direct, indirect, consequential, punitive or incidental damages even if you give notice of the possibility of such damage. 1.f.3. Limited right of replacement or refund. If you discover a defect in this electronic work within 90 days of receiving it, you can receive a refund of the money, if any, you paid for it by sending a written explanation to the person you received the work from. If you received the work on a physical medium, you must return the medium with your written explanation. The person or entity that provided you with the defective work may elect to provide a replacement copy in lieu of a refund. If you received the work electronically, the person or entity providing it to you may choose to give you a second opportunity to receive the work electronically in lieu of a refund. If the second copy is also defective, you may demand a refund in writing without further opportunities to fix the problem. 1.f.4. except for the limited right of replacement or refund set forth in paragraph 1.f.3. This work is provided to you as is, with no other warranties of any kind, express or implied, including but not limited to warranties of merchantability or fitness for any purpose. 1.f.5. Some states do not allow disclaimers of certain implied warranties or the exclusion or limitation of certain types of damages. If any disclaimer or limitation set forth in this agreement violates the law of the state applicable to this agreement, the agreement shall be interpreted to make the maximum disclaimer or limitation permitted by the applicable state law. The invalidity or unenforceability of any provision of this agreement shall not void the remaining provisions. 1.f.6. Indemnity. You agree to indemnify and hold the foundation, the trademark owner, any agent or employee of the foundation, anyone providing copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works in accordance with this agreement, and any volunteers associated with the production, promotion and distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works, harmless from all liability, costs and expenses, including legal fees, that arise directly or indirectly from any of the following which you do or cause to occur. A. Distribution of this or any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work. B. Alteration, modification, or additions or deletions to any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work, and C. Any defect you cause. Section 2. Information about the mission of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol is synonymous with the free distribution of electronic works in formats readable by the widest variety of computers, including obsolete, old, middle-aged and new computers. It exists because of the efforts of hundreds of volunteers and donations from people in all walks of life. Volunteers and financial support to provide volunteers with the assistance they need are critical to reaching Project Gutenberg trademark symbol's goals and ensuring that the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol collection will remain freely available for generations to come. In 2001, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation was created to provide a secure and permanent future for Project Gutenberg trademark symbol and future generations. To learn more about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation and how your efforts and donations can help, see sections 3 and 4 and the Foundation information page at www.gutenberg.org. Section 3. Information about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation is a non-profit 501(c)(3) educational corporation organized under the laws of the state of Mississippi and granted tax-exempt status by the Internal Revenue Service. The Foundation's IN or Federal Tax Identification Number is 64-6221541. Contributions to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation are tax-deductible to the full extent permitted by U.S. federal laws and your state's laws. The Foundation's business office is located at 809 North 1500 West, Salt Lake City, UT 84116, 801, 596, 1887. Email contact links and up-to-date contact information can be found at the Foundation's website and official page at www.gutenberg.org/contact section 4. Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol depends upon and cannot survive without widespread public support and donations to carry out its mission of increasing the number of public domain and licensed works that can be freely distributed in machine-readable form accessible by the widest array of equipment, including outdated equipment. Many small donations, $1 to $5,000, are particularly important to maintaining tax-exempt status with the IRS. The Foundation is committed to complying with the laws regulating charities and charitable donations in all 50 states of the United States. Compliance requirements are not uniform and it takes a considerable effort, much paperwork and many fees to meet and keep up with these requirements. We do not solicit donations in locations where we have not received written confirmation of compliance. To send donations or determine the status of compliance for any particular state, visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. While we cannot and do not solicit contributions from states where we have not met the solicitation requirements, we know of no prohibition against accepting unsolicited donations from donors in such states who approach us with offers to donate. International donations are gratefully accepted, but we cannot make any statements concerning tax treatment of donations received from outside the United States. U.S. laws alone swamp our small staff. Please check the Project Gutenberg web pages for current donation methods and addresses. Donations are accepted in a number of other ways, including checks, online payments and credit card donations. To donate, please visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. Section 5. General information about Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. Professor Michael S. Hart was the originator of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol concept of a library of electronic works that could be freely shared with anyone. For 40 years, he produced and distributed Project Gutenberg trademark symbol ebooks with only a loose network of volunteer support. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol ebooks are often created from several printed editions, all of which are confirmed as not protected by copyright in the US unless a copyright notice is included. Thus, we do not necessarily keep ebooks in compliance with any particular paper edition. Most people start at our website, which has the main PG search facility, www.gutenberg.org. This website includes information about Project Gutenberg trademark symbol, including how to make donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, how to help produce our new ebooks, and how to subscribe to our email newsletter to hear about new ebooks.